This ex-Christian asks this really tough question about God, and Frank Turek has this amazing answer. Let's watch to find out why.
Full disclosure, I'm an agnostic atheist.
And you have a great radio voice. I'm telling you
thank
that
you.
right now.
What
You
an
should be
ironic
doing
blessing.
podcasts, man.
I may. Who
Okay,
knows?
good.
I used to be, aspire to be an apologist like you, but unfortunately that backfired.
Why?
Well, you see, I read the Bible, and that's kind of why I want to talk
But
to you
you got the voice.
I know. This is evidence against your position. But I want to ask you a simple question. Do you believe in witchcraft?
Do I believe? What do you mean? Like, do I think it's a good thing?
Well, do you believe witches
Do I believe in a
exist?
demonic realm that can be accessed? Yes.
Well, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, do you believe in witchcraft?
Define what you mean by witchcraft.
A witch. Witches. Do you believe in witches? Like the Witch of Endor, for example?
Oh, well, in the biblical sense, yes, of course,
Right.
yeah.
And do you believe in giants?
I'm a New York Giant fan.
Right. Right.
And
But
our
I'd
next
appreciate-
quarterback may be your guy.
Right. This is very amusing, but
Okay,
I
all
want
right.
a serious answer.
This is very amusing. I love how he's just being super funny about this and just kind of trying to be lighthearted, but he's going to get serious here.
What do you mean by giants?
Well, giants, like the Nephilim described in
Well,
Genesis.
yes, there's been some archaeological discoveries which suggest, there were 8-foot, 9-foot people, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I have not heard of any of that. And in fact, I've researched the matter, and I can tell you there is no archaeological evidence for that.
Let's say there isn't, because I don't have it on I usually have most of this stuff
I
here.
wouldn't expect you to just know that off the cuff.
Yeah, let's say there isn't. Does that mean they didn't exist?
Well, that there's no evidence for them?
Yeah.
Well, there's no good reason to believe there are, but you do.
Well, they could exist. See, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Right, but if you don't have any evidence, you probably shouldn't believe it.
Unless Jesus believed it and Jesus rose from the dead, and I just have a personal policy. If somebody rises from the dead, I just believe whatever the guy says.
Does it logically follow that raising from the dead makes everything you say true?
If Jesus claimed to be God and proved to be God, and God is the standard of truth, yes, it does.
How does that prove being God?
How does it prove being God that Jesus rose
For
from the dead?
example, if I stood here, claimed I was God, died tomorrow, and was risen 3 days later, does that make me God? Does that prove my claims?
Well, if you had predicted it long in advance, if you were sinless, if you did 35 other miracles over 3 years, and then you did that, yep.
That's not proof, though. It does not logically follow that because I can rise from the dead.
The question is, what do you mean by proof?
Well, it doesn't conclusively demonstrate that I am God.
Well, what would it demonstrate?
Well, it would demonstrate that I have supernatural abilities just like the demons and angels described in the Bible.
Yeah, but you see, Jesus also claimed to be God. He claimed to be the great I am of Exodus 3:14. He claimed to be the Son of Man of Daniel 7. These are all divine figures.
I understand that's what he claimed, but that's why we're all here, or at least why I'm here, is because I don't hold that to be true, and I don't think that any of the evidence you've presented, or at least citing the supernatural, proves the claim that Jesus is the Son
Well,
of
it depends
God.
on what you mean by proof, right? Someone can prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, but that doesn't mean that anybody necessarily needs to accept it.
Well,
Right.
That's right. You can choose whether or not you want to believe
That's right.
something.
That's all we're saying here. So, but I'm trying to figure out what your standard of proof is. What kind of proof would you need to think that Jesus was God?
Well, that's an interesting question because honestly, I don't know. I don't know how anyone could prove that they are omnipotent and all-knowing.
Well, you could predict the future.
Well, predicting the future, I mean, the weatherman more or less is able to do that, but not perfectly. No, the weatherman, hey, okay, the weatherman has he has a degree in meteorology.
Okay.
But none of the biblical prophecies, like for example, Jesus prophesied that the generation would pass away before they saw these wonders, where the moon would turn to blood and stars would fall out of the sky. That prophecy is demonstratively false.
Okay, hold on, Tony. Don't get a little too strident here, because that's not demonstrably false, because what Jesus is quoting in Matthew chapter 24 is Isaiah chapter 13, when Babylon was overthrown back in about 511 or 516 BC. And this is apocalyptic language to talk about a terrible time. He doesn't literally mean that the sun is going to go black and the moon's going to turn to blood and the stars are going to fall from the sky. That's apocalyptic prophecy language.
That's so great. That's such a great point. Oh my goodness. Like, sometimes when we take things so literal from the Bible, it could be totally different types of language that they're using. It could be a poetic It could be a poem. It could be a song. It could be history. But it could be like a apocryphy language.
Talk about it being a terrible time. And it was a terrible time in 70 AD. Jesus said that in 30 AD. It happened in 70 AD. That's a generation. That's when those things occurred.
Jesus described that as being the second coming, or the establishment of his kingdom on earth is when that happened.
Jesus said to Caiaphas, "You will see the Son of Man coming with power on the clouds." And what he meant was that the judgment on Israel was coming for them crucifying him. And that's what happened in 70 AD. He didn't mean the end of the world, although some Christians will say there's a dual prophecy there. There's always a short term, and then there's a long term. The short term was 70 AD. The long term is still yet to come. That's the way prophecy works in the Bible.
So whenever the prophecy doesn't come true, it's a metaphor, is how I understand this.
No, it did come true in 70 AD, but there's a further prophecy later. Same thing is true with Isaiah 7:14, with the virgin birth. There was a birth of Isaiah's son, and then there's a future birth coming down the road later. Then you go to Isaiah 9:6, it says, "The child will be born who will be called God." And then Isaiah 53 talks about the suffering servant is God. And after the suffering servant dies, he will see the light of life, a reference to the resurrection, which is then seen 700 years later.
Jesus, once again, we're in a vicious circle here. Jesus claimed that he satisfied that prophecy, but also you have the prophecy that I believe he would be a Nazarite or a Nazarene, but Nazareth and Nazarene I don't believe are the same thing. I forget which passage it is in Matthew, but I saw that the closest in my cross-reference, because I have a Bible.
Matthew chapter 2, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And it says that he was born, don't quote me, but as a Nazarene, as it was prophesied. But there is no prophecy
there's no
of
Old
that.
Testament prophecy. What he's doing is and I haven't studied that passage directly myself, but my co-author has, Dr. Norman Geisler, in his book, The Big Book of Bible Difficulties, he deals with that, so I'd have to go back and read what he says there. But I remember him saying something like what he's talking about there is he is pulling together a bunch of references in the Old Testament to say he will be a Nazarene.
Right. Well, I have to respect the time of the other people.
Well, thank you, Tony.
So,
Thank you. Tony, why are you not a Christian?
I'm not a Christian. Well, I was a Christian at one time, but I ceased to be a Christian after I began reading the Old Testament, and it occurred to me that, for example, the witch example, if somebody told me they saw a witch, I wouldn't believe it, but when I read it in the Bible, suddenly I was compelled to believe it. And
so if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Well, yes, of course I would.
Okay, so let's suppose that the Bible has errors in it, and the witch of Endor didn't happen, but Jesus rose from the dead. Would you be a Christian?
No, I wouldn't, because the only way I know about the resurrection of Jesus is through the Bible.
Well, no, not necessarily true. There wouldn't even be a New Testament if Jesus hadn't risen from the dead, and there wouldn't even be a church unless the resurrection occurred.
Did I misunderstand your question? Did you say if Jesus was not risen, but the Bible wasn't?
No. Jesus had risen from the dead, but you can't bring yourself to believe everything in the Old Testament. You can be a Christian and think some things in the Old Testament didn't happen. You can still be a Christian and do that. I think when you're doing that, you're disagreeing with Jesus, which is never wise. But you can do that.
Yes.
So just leave that option open if you would.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
I think a lot of times we like to get so caught up in the Old Testament and all these crazy things that happen in the Old Testament, and we get so bogged down on the things that happen, we don't even think about the actual reason why we are Christian in the first place, and that's because of Jesus. He died on the cross for our sins. He was perfect. Now whoever believes in him will be saved. He rose again in 3 days, and that means he's God. Therefore, we should follow him. So many people saw him after he rose again. Therefore, they believed that he was God, and because of that, they were willing to be killed to follow this person. They were willing to sacrifice their entire life for this person that they said they were God. The only reason why they would believe that he's God because they actually saw him after he died and he rose again. Therefore, that's pretty good evidence that Jesus was who he said he was, and he died on the cross for your sins, and he loves you so much, and he wants a relationship with you. So I encourage you guys to go to Jesus today. Anyway, guys, I hope you thought this video was interesting. I hope you liked it. Please comment down below your thoughts, whatever that may be. I want to know. Please subscribe if you haven't. And I think you might like this video here. Click it. Peace.